to be talking about composite imaging for commercial photography. My name is Monashee. I'm your host, and I am a photo consultant. I curate photography portfolios, define niches, and help photographers get the courage that they need to go out and get the jobs that they want. So without further ado, I am going to introduce you to Laara and Kevin, and they're going to dive in and bring them on the screen. Okay, 1 second here. Okay, so this is Kevin and Laara. Laara is, I'm going to throw up her website here so you can find out where to reach her. Laara is a co-founder of Cake Images and is also a fine art photographer. Her current project, Codex Pacificus, documents wild plants of the Pacific Northwest. She's the VP of Communications for CAPIC, which is the Canadian Association of Professional Image Creators. And Kevin Lanthier, I will just put up his link here. So Kevin is a fine art and commercial photographer. He uses composite techniques to build hyper-real scenes that explore our relationship to urban spaces. He's also a photo educator and the new president of CAPIC, the Canadian Association of Professional Image Creators. Together, they are Cake Imagery, a digital creative studio located in Vancouver, Canada, and they provide photography and retouching services to agencies directly and also offer advanced retouching services to photographers worldwide. You can find them at cakeimagery.com, and I will put that up on the screen there. So I'm going to bring them on and they can introduce themselves. Kevin and Laara, how are you?
Hello, good. How are you?
Good. So I just introduced you. Hopefully the sound was audible for people. There are people on here. Please introduce yourself. Tell us where you're tuning in from. And this is Kevin and Laara. They are going to be talking about composite imagery and do a little walkthrough for us, which is really exciting and generous of them. So you guys, tell us a little bit about how Cake Imagery came to be and you know, what your experience is in the commercial photography world.
Okay, well, I guess I'll start. Hey. So Laara and I were classmates at Lanthier College, where we studied commercial photography from 2005 to 2007. Upon graduating, I actually started assisting some commercial photographers and started working on a sport fishing resort in the summers up in Haida. Laara?
I got a job working for an advertising photographer right out of school, digital teching and retouching, and I quickly learned Photoshop and discovered I was quite good at it. And then for a few jobs for the photographer I was working for, we were really busy and needed some extra help. So I got Kevin to come in and help. And then I think it was Kevin who casually said one day we should start a retouching business. And then we left it at that for a while, I think. And then he went off to Haida. And
again, yeah.
I think I sent you an email like, hey, we should actually do this.
Yeah,
so,
when we were in school together, because I had a background prior to taking photography school in interactive multimedia design. I made interactive multimedia CD-ROMs, a phrase that sounds so painfully 90s that you can guess that that career didn't last terribly long. But because of that background, I was really comfortable with computer software and Photoshop specifically. So when I did start studying photography, working in Photoshop, building composite images came really naturally, and I was kind of like the Photoshop guy in our class. And then Laara got out, started working for a commercial photographer in about 35 seconds, just like leapfrogged ahead of me in terms of her ability and the work she was doing. So, so it was really exciting for me to come and work with her when she was working full time. And yeah, through that experience, we realized that we worked really well together. We could pass images back and forth and work on the same job simultaneously. And we thought, hey, let's do this retouching thing and see how that goes. So we started Cake Imagery in 2010 and started working for commercial photographers around Vancouver and started picking up jobs for different agencies, both here, across Canada, and around the world. So in 2014, things started to shift a little bit as we did have a background in studying photography specifically. We both thought of ourselves as photographers. We started to pursue art careers, each of us, and some of our advertising agency clients started asking us to quote on shooting jobs as well as compositing them. So we started to embark on that, and more as time has gone on, we've been shooting as well as doing Photoshop work. So at press time, Cake Imagery is sort of an all-in-one solution for agencies for shooting right through to compositing a final result. And then, of course, we're still very happy to work with advertising photographers on putting together their composites for them.
Yeah, and just on a side note, you guys should check out their websites that I put up earlier, as well as their Instagram, because their fine artwork is really, really interesting, and it's great. So check those out, as well as their Cake Imagery website. So you guys, tell us about, first of all, for anybody who doesn't know, what is a composite image?
Okay. Well, a composite image is effectively any sort of still image made up of multiple different photographs put together. So, and generally speaking, to sort of appear photorealistically as if it was a single image. So the process usually involves photographing different images, often referred to as plates is the term that we use. It's a term that's borrowed from the film industry, I believe. And it just means any image that's photographed with an intent of it being composited together later. So in this day and age, that means taking these different layers in Photoshop and cutting out different parts of them and putting them back together to create a photorealistic final product.
So it could be really simple, from shooting somebody in studio, then cutting them out and putting in a different background and making that look photorealistic, like the person was shot at that location.
Mm-hmm.
To things much more complex, like building a space or creating a location from bits and pieces of other locations to create spaces that don't actually exist, to making all sorts of impossible things happen. If you look at our website, you'll see people hanging off the edges of cliffs and rams playing slot machines and things of this nature.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And just out of curiosity, what kind of drew you to this kind of thing? Because I know both of you are really passionate about it, and it's your thing. So what made it so important for you, especially the hyper real part? I'm curious about that.
Well, for me personally, when I was, I'm gonna say 12, I think I was 12 years old when Jurassic Park came out in the theaters. And when I was a kid, I loved, rocket ships and dinosaurs, because I mean, what on earth is cooler than rocket ships and dinosaurs? Especially if there's dinosaurs in rocket ships, that would be really cool. But anyway, the Jurassic Park came out, and I remember thinking even then that everything is different now. There are dinosaurs, real live dinosaurs, and I believe that they're real, and I totally buy that they're real. And okay, now they can do anything. They can make anything happen, anything feel believable. And that, I remember that really specifically, and that impacted me. I love the idea of being able to create images, be able to tell stories that you can't just point a camera at and make happen, that you need some kind of special effect to create. And that just put in me this desire I can use computers to make any image that I want and make people believe that it's real. And the ability to do that just struck me as being so cool, so much fun. And yeah, it really kind of informed a lot of what I decided to do from there. And it was a weird and kind of twisty route to get to where I am now. I didn't plan from that age that I would be compositing photography. I didn't even plan I'd be working with photographs. But that's sort of where it started for me.
Very cool.
Yeah, for me, I didn't. Well, when I was in photography school, I never had the intention of pursuing advertising photography. It did sort of happen organically, and I discovered that I do really enjoy it. I really enjoy how each job is a challenge, and each job sort of pushes me to just be a better photographer or retoucher, and just constantly be as creative as possible. And I think that's why we're both also pursuing fine art, because we need that constant transcendence of what we've been able to do.
Yeah.
Right. That's great. Okay, so just really quickly before we dive into, because I know you both have something specific, some examples to show us. But before we dive into that, can you kind of outline what the process is from the beginning stages of a production and how planning for a composite works?
Yeah, absolutely. So as retouchers, we really prefer to be brought in as early as possible when a job is being put together. So most of our photographer clients will contact us at the quoting stage before they even have the job, just first of all to get our portion of their quote accurate. And usually when you're working with advertising agencies, they have pretty tight comps. Usually we have a pretty concise idea of what we're doing right from that point. So we can put together a pretty accurate quote that we can stick to vast majority of the time, right through to the end of the process. But even if not at the quoting stage, certainly in the pre-production stage, we want to have the opportunity to work with the photographers we're working with to convey how to best photograph the plates, so the different photographs to be composited together to make that composite as seamless and believable as possible. And that could come down to things like perspective, lighting, direction, just sometimes dropping white cards or black cards behind different subjects. Shooting blank plates, we always want a blank background plate.
Even just the choice of what colors that maybe talent should be wearing in case the color needs to be changed later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all these sorts of things. So the earlier we can be brought in, the better. For a lot of photographers we work with, they're very familiar with the process. They've done it many times before. So usually just a quick chat beforehand, they know what they're doing. Others who are not as comfortable with the process of compositing, for some of them it makes sense to have us right there on set when they're shooting to make sure that we're getting everything that we need, to make sure that the camera's not moving when it shouldn't be moving, so on and so forth, so that the composite's going to come together in the best, most seamless, and quickest way, because, of course, the quickest way means, of course, the most affordable for them and their clients as well.
Mm-hmm. And when you're working with photographers remotely, say, for example, if you're doing composite work, do you do any of the work or can you do any of the work in advance, like helping them plan out their composites?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of if they show us pre-scout photos or sort of scouting photos, so we know what they're thinking for locations, we can sort of take a look and troubleshoot if we think there's going to be any issues. And just, again, sort of try to visualize how the shoot's going to go down and sort of build a plan for how to photograph those plates, how to photograph some subjects separate from the background, where that needs to happen, what's a concern, what isn't a concern. Often, too, just not only just with the photographer, excuse me, but working with stylists, hair and makeup people, there are some things that are fantastically easy to fix in post that can be a real struggle to get right on set, and some things that are very easy to get right on set that would be very difficult to composite or fix in post later. So we can let them know what they need to get right and what we can take care of. Right.
Okay. I am going to turn things over to you guys, and I'm going to put up the screen so that you guys can share what you have to share today. For those of you who are watching right now, ask your questions as we go along. We're probably going to hold off until the end to answer them, but get them out of your brain and onto the screen so that we can see them. Also, there's a delay between when you say things and we see them. So ask your questions as we go through, and then we'll address them at the end. So who is going to be going first?
I'll start. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna turn this over to you, and then I'm gonna put the screen up for you.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
Okay. There we go. So what are we seeing there? Have we got the screen up?
Yep, it's up.
Okay, perfect. So you're looking at this image of this very sort of semi-creepy marionette woman standing with a bunch in the background?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this is a personal project that I did a few years back now, sort of this marionette maker's workshop. So I wanted to create this space where we had sort of these different marionettes and sort of different stages of completion, some different outfits and so forth. And it may not be immediately apparent because the makeup jobs are so interesting, but this is actually the same model. It's the same woman repeated 5 times. So in terms of how you bring an image like this together, let me just talk a little bit about just some of the basic process of shooting with plates here. So I'll just show you where we started. So we started here. So this is generally when you're shooting in plates, this is sort of the first and most important one to get. It's your blank background plate. So we just have the location itself sort of unimpeded by other things. And as Laara mentioned earlier, the simplest composite would be just having a background plate, then having, say, your talents on another plate, maybe shot against a black or white background so they're easy to clip out. And then the advantage of that, of course, is then I can just move her wherever I want her. If you want to shuffle the talent around or recompose your frame, because you've got them on separate layers from separate photographs, it's really quite easy to do. Just a quick note about that. One of the things that people often surmise you would do is shoot your talent on a green screen, because you think from the film industry. Not so much, generally speaking, the best way to do things in still photography. Chroma keying, or keying out by having a rare or specific color, like that green screen color, is really advantageous in film, I think. And I say this with a degree of ignorance. I'm not from the film industry. But just the fact that you're looking at 24 frames per second, you want a way that's going to much more automatically extract a subject from a background. So using that chroma keying technique is very useful there. But in still photography, where we have one image that we're looking at, so much more resolution, so much finer detail, shooting on green screen tends to give a lot of green edges and bizarre color fringing to subjects. So we generally speaking, we shoot rather on usually just a white or a black background, depending on if the background scene is sort of higher key or lower key. And in this case, she was shot on a black background, but we'll get to that in a bit. But I just wanted to mention that that's, again, the benefit of, one of the obvious and immediate benefits of shooting separate plates is that you can recompose your frame or move your subject around. Okay? So let's get, whoops, trim that layer off for a second. So coming back to this point here, this is where I started once again. And I really like those lights in the background. You'll see there's sort of these rusty green light fixtures in the distance. And I really wanted them to be the key light for my scene. Problem is, first of all, they didn't have light bulbs in them. I couldn't have had light in them if I wanted to. And secondly, I wanted to freeze my subject with strobes, so that also wasn't going to work. So what I needed to do was create the appearance that those lights were actually on. And the way that I did that was by taking my flashes and popping them up into those lights, as if there was a light bulb in there shining the light back down. And then, of course, the light reflects back down on the scene. Now, the problem, obviously, is now I've got lights and light stands right in the middle of the frame. So how do you get rid of them? Well, the key to this whole process is the camera is mounted to a tripod. It is locked down, dialed in. I've got my shutter speed and aperture chosen. I'm on manual focus, so it's not bouncing around. I've got a big, heavy tripod. It's weighed down, sandbagged down, taped down. It's got police tape around it and 3 armed guards on it, ensuring nobody touches the camera and that the camera doesn't move throughout the process, so that I can continue moving things around my frame. And as I shoot, they will pin register. They'll be in perfect registration with one another when I layer all those images up in Photoshop. So we've got our strobe here. So then I basically move those light stands over here and do another shot like this. And then I did even get another one just to get the corner. You can see the top left corner of the frame there, just to get the light going right up into there. And so because I have these images together, I have photos for where the light stands are, and I have photos for where the light stands aren't. So by showing the parts of the image where there's not a light stand, I can get rid of the light stands and just have the lights appear as though they're on. And then in Photoshop, I can blend and mask those back into the scene like so. So the end result is we go from here to there. And I create that appearance that those lights are actually there, actually turned on, and casting light down into the scene. Okay. So from here, I shot a darker exposure plate. So I just changed the shutter speed basically to get a lower exposure for the ambient light, changed the shutter speed again to get a brighter exposure for the ambient light, just to have detail on the highlights and shadows where I wanted them. And then I did a little bit of retouching just because the highlight on the bench there was bothering me. The little stick on the right side of frame there, it sort of looks like in the final version like it's going through her hand. Just to put her back in there. Kind of looks like it's cutting right through her hand. So to prevent that from happening, I just cloned that, what you call that hat, basically, in that area. And I wasn't so much worried about the other one because later on her body would be covering the original one. So from there, I really wanted to give this kind of a bit of a timeless feel, sort of almost maybe a bit of a Victorian feel, and those walls being very plain I thought would be much more interesting if they had some wallpaper on them like so. So here you can see I've just got a flat image of wallpaper basically, which I tiled and extended out and manipulated the perspective so that the perspective matches what's happening in the scene. So you can see they're distorted to follow the vanishing lines from the ceiling or from the surface of the workbench to give them the correct perspective. From there, it's just a matter of masking them in so that they're only visible in the correct place. and then using a blending mode in Photoshop to mix them back into the scene. Okay. Do a little bit of adjusting for contrast, a little bit of vignetting, retouch a couple more details, and now we'll get to putting the individual marionettes in. So here's where we see some more of the plates being shot. So here's the first one, and the first thing you'll notice is that my lights, again, are right in frame, and they're there specifically to mimic the lighting that's there on set. There's a strip bank kind of replicating the light that would be coming from the lights in the background, as well as one coming top down to, again, sort of mimic the lights, both the pot lights above and then the light behind her as well as some fill from the front. And you'll see I've even got a bit of bounce card for detail from the bottom, sort of for under her feet. My buddy Ray's helping me on this shoot, assisting here. He's holding her arm up for me so that I can unceremoniously chop it off, which of course is easy to do. All I have to do is hide that part of that layer, and then it looks like she's got no arm. So, you know, again, one of the benefits. You could have always, of course, just amputate your model's arms, but, you know, it's hard to find models who are willing to do that. Your insurance premiums go through the roof, blah, 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 blah. It's much easier to do that in post. So from there, we go on to the second one. So again, you can see the lights have moved around to mimic the lighting direction of those two lights, which I'm imagining are on. So again, the strip bank is mimicking one of the lights. There's a socked beauty dish mimicking the other one. And then she's cut out into place there. Same thing here. You'll see in this case, I've got just the standard grids, spots rather, with grids on them to sort of mimic those spotlights directly above her, and the strip bank to again mimic the light coming from behind, as well as some fill from the front, of course. Masked out so that she's in place. Same thing over here. Again, so the lighting is always moving around to mimic the light that, again, I'm fictionally putting into the scene. And I don't mind the fact that those, you know, lighting modifiers are directly in the frame because, of course, I'm going to be masking them out anyway. So, again, that's how all these different plates come together to sort of, oops, add that one in there. So this is how all these different plates come together to put these different versions of the same model in the scene over and over again. When we move on to the hero, you'll see that I just dropped just a V-flat behind her just to get a black background, so it'd be easier to extract her from the background. As we saw earlier, I can now move her left, right, however I want to. Cut her out like so. Do a little bit of retouching, almost to make her look a bit artificial because, of course, she's supposed to be made of wood. And then here's the next trick. So if you know those little wooden drawing mannequins you can get, you might recognize them. You can buy them at art stores. I bought one of those, took it into Studio, lit it similarly to how each of these are lit, photographed it sort of in the same sort of body position from the same approximate angle, cut out bits and pieces, layered them up on top of the skin, and this is how I got the wood texture to sort of create the marionette effect on her skin. So this was a separate shoot that I did a few days later, just a tabletop setup on a black background, basically. And that lets me get the wood texture. From there, shooting the string. One of the things that's really easy to do in Photoshop is if your subject is against a white background or a black background, especially if it's a bright subject on a black background or a darker subject on a white background, they're quite easy to extract. So you'll see I just saw shots of string against a black background, which is therefore quite easy to cut out, and uses the strings holding up the various marionettes. And then it was just a little bit of overall color desaturation to finish the image off. Okay. So once again, starting from here and putting in one piece at a time, building up the background, and then again, putting in the plates. So everyone shot separately, lit separately, and then cut out and arranged to create this final image. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how shooting with plates can create, if nothing else, just an impossible lighting scenario. Obviously, we've got the same woman repeated 5 times, so that's something that's awfully hard to do in camera. And then there's a little bit of other Photoshop trickery going on in here. But again, you can see just how shooting those texture elements separately, if you use a similar light and you know, from similar perspective and similar angle, you can put those pieces together. So it's just about matching the perspective, matching the lighting, and then figuring out where one photo ends and the next one begins. What's the transition between 2 photos? And that's how we can put together plates like so. So that is it for me, Monashee.
Wow. That was so cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. Before you go, there's one question. We might as well answer that while we're here. Just sort of, this is my question, and then I'll jump to the other person. But how long does something like that take? The whole process.
Well, the shoot itself was a long day. That was, I think, a 14-hour day to do that shoot, from arrival to departure at the location. The post work, I would say the first 90% of it was probably about 40 hours in Photoshop. Probably worked on it for about a solid week.
Wow.
8 hours a day sort of thing. And then the last 10% of it was probably about another 40 hours in Photoshop of just me tweaking and tinkering and going back and forth. So it's definitely a substantial commitment of time. This, as I mentioned, was several years ago. I would imagine if I did it today, I'd be able to do it a bit quicker, just from having a few more years experience now. But that does give you a basic idea of the time frame.
Okay, so Ellis Au asks, what would be your ideal blend mode to get the wood texture to mix onto skin?
I think in this case it was 2 layers. I doubled the layer up and I put them both in soft light, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But it was definitely soft light, overlay, hard light, that sort of section of blending modes. Those are the ones that basically anything darker than middle gray goes darker, anything brighter than middle gray goes brighter. That's generally what you're going to be using to apply a texture to another location. And the other thing I'll mention, do we still have the image up, Monashee?
No, but I can put it up. 1 second.
Oh, sure. You can just throw us back over for a second. The other thing I'll mention too really quick is the wallpaper as well. I kind of skipped over this because I wanted to discuss more the process of shooting the plates than the actual Photoshop work specifically. But in terms of getting that wallpaper to look like it's actually on the wall and in the room, in terms of how the light is falling, that's blending modes as well. So I believe that's the overlay blend mode to put the fact that it was like sort of a gray blank wall helped. And the other wall, I think I had another layer where I desaturated it down to gray or did something with the color anyway. But using a blending mode as well, picked up the lighting and the shadows that were on the walls and had them blend through the wallpaper. So again, once I had it masked into space, so it was physically in the right area, then I could have the lighting and the shadows follow as well. So again, it feels like it's actually there in the room. Also blending modes.
Awesome. Okay, so should we pop over to Laara now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Demonstration. Okay. Does she want me to keep the screen up or switch to a different one?
Yes, just leave the screen up.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, let me just open it. Okay. Oops. All right, just gonna share the screen again. Okay. All right, are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay. Whoops. Oh, I can't full screen it. There we go. All right, so this is a job that we shot for a local credit union. It's much simpler than the image Kevin has shown, but there's a few other specific things we wanted to discuss. So one thing that's really important in compositing is the edge interaction. So what I mean by that is how the object, so the person in this case, interacts with what you're compositing it onto or into. So we have this person that we have got onto a very shiny trophy. So you can see here, the interaction that is important is the reflection. And we needed the reflection to be as realistic as possible. We didn't want to just grab this person, duplicate him to sort of, make that reflection. So what we had to do, here, I'll show you, is we actually shot him on, a mirror. Just a simple round mirror that we found at IKEA. So wait, sorry, that's not showing up, is it? Okay, I'm gonna have to just unshare.
We just move that layer over.
Yeah. Oops. There we go. All right, is this showing up? No.
No, just move the layer up to the document.
Yeah.
You can always just share your.
There we go.
It's easier. Okay, there you go.
There we go. So we had to shoot him on a mirror, on a round mirror. So one thing too, with like, it gave us these realistic reflections, but it also gave us a perspective reference, because we needed to composite him onto a round trophy. And so since we had this round reference to begin with, we knew what angle to shoot the trophy at, so that you know, the two angles matched. So let me go through what we did for this guy. So we started with the base plate shot in studio on a mirror, and our client wanted to add in an arm here. So we did a quick, where is it showing up? Not showing up for some reason. There we go. So we dropped in an arm. Sorry. Right. And then just did some like pretty basic cleanup and color adjustments to him, other adjustments. We usually often, so we all work with a tablet, and we often have to draw in some hair. I think you can see it here, just to help make him not look so cut out. We can see a little better with the background. There. And then when we have, so we have his reflection dropping in on top of the trophy. Whoops, sorry, screen sharing had stopped. This one, there we go. And another thing, so with this trophy, it's actually, it's built up of toiletries. Well, toilet products, like a toothbrush holder. Here, I need to show you. Sorry, we have many different smart objects and doesn't seem to want to share.
Is that on the Zoom end or the phone?
Yeah,
end?
It just, I have different windows open. There we go.
Okay.
Are you seeing the trophy base?
Yes.
So basically, we photographed a wooden trophy, which we spray painted silver, but it didn't really, it wasn't believable enough. We wanted something nice and chrome. So we, here we go. Let's, anyways. So yeah, here is, I believe this is a toilet brush holder. So we photographed that, we just used a chunk of it. And then here's the base of the toilet brush holder, I believe. And just basically had to build it up in many bits and pieces, bring little bits. So it's quite a complex composite. The trophy actually was more complex than dropping in the person into the little scene. Created a label and cut it out. So you can see, compared to the wooden trophy, went from there to there. It's quite a big difference. But we used it as a reference for, well, how the highlights and shadows should fall, and for the perspective, which then, let me switch over. Anyways, became this. So yeah, it's much simpler than the marionette Kevin had shown us, but has some different things to consider. Specifically, yeah, like the edge interaction. Yeah.
Do you want me to take the screen down?
Sure.
Okay. Wow, that's so cool. So much planning goes into that. Wow. And like creative solutions, like it's so cool that you like thought of, oh, a brush. Did you have to like go and search for something specific?
Yes.
Yeah, the initial plan, of course, was just to find a nice chrome trophy base. And that search for that particular prop actually didn't work out so well. So I went to several trophy stores and found there were wood ones, there were plastic ones, but just none that had that natural shiny chromeness to them. So we just needed things that had chrome lips and edges, and went down to IKEA and found that lo and behold, the bathroom section had everything that we needed, whether it was a toothbrush holder, a toothbrush cup that we turned upside down, or the toilet brush holder, or the little lid for the toilet brush holder. So we turned random.
But we did make sure we had a few different trophy options. So we had the wooden ones. We had like the ones we didn't spray paint, so we still photographed them, and then we photographed the toilet products also.
Yeah.
So it's always important to don't just have one plan, have multiple plans and do all of that, because you don't necessarily know what's going to work until you get into Photoshop.
Yeah, and the other thing too here, again, as Laara mentioned, the key takeaway, I think, is just shooting the guy in the mirror was the trick that makes it work, right? That's where the two pieces come together. That's how we make sure that we have that real reflection, not trying to fake one, because that reflection is very difficult to fake, because it would not be reflecting the side of his foot. It's got to reflect the bottom of his foot. And the only way to get that is to either make him stand upside down and take another photo, or actually put a mirror underneath. And then, of course, it gives us the perspective reference. So now we know what the top angle perspective of our trophy base should be. And then once we photograph that, the trophy base itself becomes a reference for how to photograph an angle and build the little chrome bits, right? So nothing ever just gets created from scratch in Photoshop. Or if it is, that's generally the worst approach. That's generally going to give you the worst result. You want to be referencing reality wherever possible. You want to be photographing things in such a way that you have a plan that the angle, perspective, lighting direction are all going to match between all of your different plates. And again, this is why that consultation with your retoucher before you shoot is so important.
Yes. Yes. One thing I wanted to say about references, very, very important. So if you can shoot references whenever possible, do so. What I mean specifically, like if you need to drop a background into a shot of a person in studio, when you shoot the background, make sure you do a version with the person standing there as well. So you know roughly how big the person should be once you Photoshop them in, and like what angle.
Yeah, and it's not just angle and scale as well. But okay, so I mean, let's just to extrapolate that to the likely scenario. So let's say, again, you're on location, you're out, I don't know, the forest somewhere. You're going to shoot a model in studio to drop into that spot in the forest. So have your assistant, or if you're using a tripod, just jump in yourself, stand in the spot where you want the model to be, because you'll get a shadow reference. You'll understand how the shadows are falling on the ground there. You'll get the scale reference. You'll have a rough idea how large a person should be. And also, you'll focus on them. If you have any amount of shallowness of depth of field, you need your point of sharp focus to be where the person's standing. If you focus on infinity, which is usually the impulse, if you just hold up your camera and shoot it a landscape, generally you're focusing at or near infinity, then the focus point is going to be back there, and the ground that the person is standing on may not necessarily be maximally sharp. And that, of course, is where you need your point of focus to be. So all of those things are things to consider. How big the person is, what the lighting direction is, how the shadows are falling, and then, of course, that they're the plane of focus.
Yes, so lots of things to consider. That's why it's good to talk to retouchers from the very, very beginning, because we know all the things that we need to make sure it works.
Totally. So for those of you who are watching right now, if you have any questions, now would be the time to ask, because we're going to wrap up soon, but I'd love for some questions to get answered. So go ahead and ask your questions. There's a bit of a delay. If you're watching the replay, ask your questions anyway, and we'll try and hop on a little bit later and answer those if we can. So this has been great, you guys. Yeah, it's totally a new world for me. I'm like, whoa.
I think you get one of these.
What's that? Oh, is that the tablet?
Yeah. And it takes a while getting used to, but get one and force yourself to use it.
Yeah. And what would you say for photographers, like what's a good kind of starting point if they want to get their feet wet and try this out? Like what's something really simple that they could do to give this a try?
I think just trying to like photograph a person and dropping them into a different scene. Mm-hmm. It's very simple, basically, background and a person, or like or an object or a pet or something. Actually, that would probably be difficult with fur.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that they're just generally not as cooperative as people. But so that's, and that's the standard scenario for composite. A substantial chunk of the work that we do involves studio photograph people being placed into background locations, just because it's so much more cost effective and I don't want to say efficient, but it's just a lot less effort required rather than moving all your lighting on location and maybe needing to shut down a road or get permits and all of those things, to just be able to go out and just as a photographer, just shoot your background and then be able to work with talent in studio and get the lighting just perfect and the pose just perfect and all of the, you know, things to do with wardrobe just right. And then as well, just other little things you might not think about, like, you know, just this skin, just the skin of your talent. When you're in a nice, warm, comfy studio, generally speaking, you're not going to get the goosebumps or the blotchiness that you get if someone's out shivering, freezing outdoors somewhere. So these little things, even though they may seem small, do offer some benefits for compositing an image rather than just shooting it all on camera on location. Mm-hmm. But, you know, the things that we're suggesting in terms of what to do, that kind of comes down to where you're at with Photoshop and whether your desire is to actually do this Photoshop work yourself, or if, obviously, as I mentioned, you're going to be hiring somebody to do that, then it's just a matter of finding a retoucher to work with and yeah, seeing what they can do, seeing what you can do, and just letting your imagination kind of run a little bit outside of the normal bounds of physics. Mm-hmm. and thinking about the different sorts of things you can do.
So there's a question in the group. Before I ask that question, so when you're not dealing with composites that are planned out in advance, I know there's also things like head swaps and things that come up. You know, is that something that you do kind of after the fact as well for people?
Ooh. Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's, you know, we're describing the ideal scenario, but there's also a lot of, you know, photo 911 where people just have a problem, they need it fixed, and then of course we're bound by what we have. If you let's say you need to move a person, but they were shot behind another person, so we don't have an arm for them. It's like, we could try to take the other arm and flip it over and make a copy, but the light's going to be coming from the wrong direction now. You know what I mean? Like, you immediately run into limitations. So the more that you're planning it, obviously, the better the result's going to be. But of course, there are a range of things that can be done even without that planning. Just depends on what it is.
I'm curious how you estimate, well, like how you know, like say, for example, in the last example that you gave with the when you ended up using the toilet brush thing, like how do you estimate on something like that in advance when you don't know that you're going to run into those obstacles along the way?
Short answer, I don't know.
You anticipate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of, I assume we put some amount of time into searching for and purchasing props, and then, you know, you assume at the beginning that's going to be a perfect chrome trophy base, and you're going to need some time to find it. And yeah, I don't know. I think maybe some of the time spent to drive down to IKEA may have technically been out of pocket. I don't know, but you know, you sort of find a way to make it work.
Okay. So Greg D. Shipman in the group, I'm just going to pull up his question. I would be interested in how you market composite style imagery to businesses. What are your typical clients?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, generally we're marketing predominantly to agencies. So that, you know, simplifies matters. When we're speaking with agency people, whether they're the art directors or creative directors or even the accounts people or whomever, producers, they know what we do. They know what needs to be done because they've been through this rodeo before. So it's really just a matter of staying in touch with them, showing them our newest work, or introducing ourselves to agencies that we haven't worked with before. In terms of working with these things client direct, that is a whole other ballpark and something that we're we're learning. Yeah, let's say something we're realizing may be valuable for us to get into, but I don't have a ton of experience with that to be able to proffer a whole lot of advice, I'm afraid.
Yeah, sometimes we'll get quote requests from client direct works or other agency people, and we've never heard of them. There's a lot of word of mouth, right? So you need to just always be out there, get to know people, show your work.
It's like anything else.
Yeah.
It
takes time.
90% networking, right? So.
Yeah, and I would imagine though that within like agencies are very familiar with, you know, the fact that this compositing would need to be done, whereas clients might not know that. Yeah. Would you say that's probably why you're not getting as much from client direct?
Well, just because maybe that, but then also just we've never really approached it. We've never really marketed ourselves in that way. It's a little bit different, I think, because we started as a retouching company. So we market ourselves to photographers. We market ourselves to agencies. We haven't really marketed ourselves to the end client. And although that's something we've been thinking about recently, and how to approach that, it's not, like I said, it's not something we have experience with at this juncture, really. But I don't know. I'd imagine it would take some degree of education. You really have to explain what it is you do and explain why it takes the time and the money that it'll take, but also where there's benefits. You could explain, how shooting to do a composite is actually going to be financially beneficial. There's lots of situations where it is, as I just mentioned before, rather than doing a big location shoot, just doing a simple in-studio shoot, and then comping into an outdoor location when you can just run out and shoot it, can actually be, can actually save the client money.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so if there aren't any more questions from the group, I'll just pop over here to see if anybody has asked anything else, but I'm not seeing anything at the moment. So thank you guys so much for being here and taking the time to show us what you do, because it's pretty amazing.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Monashee. We appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you guys for watching, and feel free to ask your questions, and we'll try and pop on and do our best to answer them at a later time. And hopefully this was helpful and that you enjoyed it. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.